my name is Jai Morjaria.
Sounded like you forgot your name then, which is quite funny.
I did have a second there. I was like, Jay something.
What's the opposite?
Yeah, it's Jai Morjaria. I have been a lighting designer for 5 years now. 5 years. So still very new at it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
And Jay, where did you train and how did you get into it all?
So I'll start with how I got into it, and then I'll tell you where I trained. So I got into it because I left school when I was 17 because I wasn't doing very well, and I got my results from my AS levels. I don't think they have AS levels anymore, but
yeah, I don't think they do. I think you're right. I think they got cold a few years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, so so they so I got my results, and I realized that I did really badly, and school was not working for me. And so I looked at some other options and was actually looking at going into engineering. And they turned around and said that the course was full, but to look around the website, and a little pop-up advert came up to do production arts at college. And it just sounded really cool. I'd never done anything in theatre before. I was actually turned down from being in the theatre society at school to do the lighting, which I think is quite funny now. But
do you know why you were turned down?
Yeah, like I wrote to them like 2 or 3 times to ask, because they kept sending out bulletins, does anyone want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, I want to do it. I want to do it. And they just never said yes. And so, well, I mean, look at me now. It's okay. I do it on a daily basis. It's all right. So I forgot what I was saying. So I left school and signed up to this course the next day. And I was there for like a year and a half because I left early to start as a follow spot in the West End. So I follow spotted for Michael Grandage and the RSC. And while I was there, I met some other lighting designers. So I met Kieran Cunningham and Paulie Constable. And through talking to them and their associates, I found out about RADA. And I ended up going to RADA to do my 3 years of drama school. And then started designing from my first year by sneaking out and designing concert shows at night time. And so, yeah, that's where I went and how I got into it, all in one question.
That's brilliant, thank you. And you were saying while you were studying, you did shows alongside.
Yeah.
Were they things like the Edinburgh Fringe and?
So it started out in my first year. I didn't do any anything remotely professional. It was a band, a string band, which I don't think I'll mention their name, but a string band. And I used to go and meet them at like 6 in the evening. They drive me in South London. They drive me to where their show was. We'd do the show from like 8 to 10 or 8 to 11. And then they drive me back at 2 a.m. And then I was back in university at 8 a.m. the next morning. And that was like, so I did that quite a few times to just try and get a bit more experience. But those were all over England, which was really nice. And I only really started doing like semi-professional shows from my second year of uni, which I saw. My first one was Boris Godunov at Brockley Jack Theatre. So yeah, it started off in Fringe, and you just kind of got to keep working at it until you one day get that lucky break.
So when you're doing a show, do you tend to program for yourself, or do you have a program?
What a fun question. Because that's a recent thing that I've been a recent point that I've been working with a lot of companies on, because I think we have to acknowledge that a programmer is a separate job, and admittedly, on small scale shows, it's absolutely fine to do your own programming. But when there's a big team, I think it's especially challenging when you're trying to have 5 or 6 conversations at the same time with different departments and program and design. It just kind of muddles up in your head a little bit. And also a lot of people don't realize that can you hear those notifications, by the way?
Yeah.
I'm very much a designer. Like, it's not, I know my technology and what I need it to do, but yeah, I rely on my team quite a lot. And so, yeah.
Fair enough. So I'm guessing like a production electrician and stuff like that is quite a valuable thing for you to have.
Yeah, definitely. My production electricians and programmers, are invaluable. I think knowing where you really excel is important. And so for me, the design process and the conceptual side of design, I really enjoy. When it comes to knowing the exact specification of lights, like I have people who I can literally call up and say, I need something to do this, this, and this. What would you recommend? And you just have to trust them enough to go along with it and see how it goes.
So how did you find your team? So your programmers and production electricians, I'm guessing you have a say in who ends up on part of your team?
Most of the time I do. Some of the time I have no say at all. But my team, I don't really know. I guess you just kind of come across people and you click with them. And so, like, I know I've used Jack on a few shows, and I use a guy called Tom Turner a lot, because you have a rapport with them, and also tech can get very stressful, and if you know how to crack a joke, then you're in my good books. And also just understanding when to say stuff to the LD, I think, is really important. Like I mentioned, like, you're having so many conversations and you're trying to manage so many different things, that sometimes having just a nice voice next to you is really settling. And so generally that's what I look for in a team member.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say it's my team at all. I think it's like our team. We're all good at different things, and together we kind of make one. But like, I couldn't do a lot of my job without them, and they couldn't do a lot of their job without me. And so I think it's like a give and take kind of relationship.
And would you say your jobs you find online or people recommend you?
So I have had really bad luck with jobs online. Like, I never ever, when it comes to like writing applications and writing to someone to ask for work, I'm absolutely terrible at that sort of thing. The one thing which I would definitely say to anyone is, if you aren't good at that stuff, is just write to someone and say, do you want to meet for a coffee?
I swear, you're so popular. This is going to become an issue.
I'm so sorry. Where was I? What I'd recommend is I know a way to fix half of this. Okay. I'm just quitting as many apps as I can.
You're just making the editing process a lot harder.
I'm really sorry. Yeah, what I'd recommend is, if you are bad at writing to people, is ask them to go for a coffee and just introduce yourself face to face. You'll be surprised how many people are willing to meet you if you offer to buy them a coffee. And so that's all it really takes. And I know it's like really nerve-wracking to do it, but you have to do it either online or in face, and you just got to find which one is better for you.
What would you say is the biggest mistake you've made and ideally learnt from? But
I know the biggest mistake I've made, and it is the most embarrassing mistake I've ever made and hugely affected my career.
Do you want to talk about it or not? Because you're
No, I openly talk about it because it was such a silly thing to do on my half that like it's 100% my own fault. And I think everyone can learn from it quite a bit. Is I was really lucky years ago, while I was studying, to shadow a quite large designer. And while I was shadowing this designer, they set me up with another very large lighting designer. And I went to go meet this person after loads of emails. This person is like, you know when you like dream of meeting one of your idols? However, I realized I'd never actually seen one of their shows. But I'd researched them like endlessly. I just never had a chance. And I went to go meet them. And I had nothing to talk about. And it was one of the most embarrassing experiences of my life. Just that I obviously hadn't researched deep enough into their work. I didn't know them well enough. I hadn't seen one of their shows. And I think the key to that is, before you meet another designer and ask for their advice, is to make sure you know their stuff properly. And if you can go and see one of the shows, I fully recommend. I had no excuse with this designer to not have seen one of their shows. And they did tell me off for it.
Oh, really?
Person. Yeah. And from that, I learned a lot. Like nowadays, before I meet anyone, I would have researched them endlessly, including on social media. Yeah, but it taught me a lot. It taught me to take my job a little bit more seriously, even to the point where I was working so hard that I was forgetting to see theatre shows. And that was another big part of what the person told me, is that I need to start going to see more shows, to have things to talk to people about, go see more art. Yeah, both of which I do. And I definitely enjoyed my job a lot more because I do that. So thank you to that person, but also you made me cry. So it's a love-hate relationship.
Very good. What would you say was the biggest challenge you faced since finishing your course?
My personal insecurity of doing this job. You will get turned down for jobs. You'll get thrown under the bus by friends. You'll get unemployed for months. It's really hard, but you've got to remember that the payoff is much greater, and you're doing something you love. And so, yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge is myself, and knowing that the work will come, and trying to drum up that work and get somewhere from it, I think.
Do you ever go to hire house, or do you vary at each time, or as in, because I know it's quite easy to develop almost a relationship with a hire manager, and at that point they're your go-to person. So have you done that already or not?
So I have, how many hire houses do I use? 1, 2. I use like 2.5 hire houses. I say half because the third one is really nice and I want to use them. But I mainly use 2 hire houses. And I would say one of the hardest things about being a lighting designer is making that relationship with a hire company, because you always feel like you can't spend enough money with them. But if you look at it from the other way around, is they want to make friends with you, because you're, one day, if you make it big, you'll get them a £50,000 a year contract. And so it's an investment both ways, and it's a really scary thing to look at as a young lighting designer. But yeah, I personally, I use 2 companies, and I very much am the kind of person who will like call and talk to them 6 times a day when I send in an equipment request. So yeah, you get to know them really well. And I think that's really important, and not something that anyone should miss. It's a great, and I think it's really great making connections with manufacturers as well, just to understand the gear a bit more. But I think the key is definitely get to know your hire companies.
That's great. And you touched a lot there on making like partnerships and working up that working relationship. Do you ever do any assistant and associate work to sort of keep building bonds?
I think being an assistant associate is really important and something you will learn a lot from. And it's definitely something that I still go and shadow other lighting designers. There's no, like, even like, I think maybe like 6 months ago, I went to shadow someone. You can learn an insane amount from it, even if it's just that one day when you do a show that big of how to manage it. But me personally, I just haven't ended up doing a lot of associating and assisting. I think I've only done like 4 or 5 shows like that.
You've given out some great advice through this chat. Have you got any other advice for young designers that you'd like to say?
I'd say the biggest thing is to just keep at it. Like, it's not easy, but if you really love what you're doing, then it will pay off in the long run. And the people you meet is what makes it really fun and really interesting, and you'll make friends for life. And so just remember that, and also just really appreciate the people who are helping you get to where you want to be and who are helping you. So, like, the people who you're working with, make sure you're spending time with them outside of work and in work. Like, I think that's the most important thing, is really get to know people personally, and it'll pay off both for you and them.